Wide-angle lenses are an absolute essential for landscape photographers. Most landscape photographers decide to use wide-angle zooms, but me personally, I enjoy a nice wide-angle prime, and I'll explain exactly why in this video. What's up guys, it's Project Photography back with the video, and today I went to the mountains yesterday to go shoot some great landscape photography. It was really refreshing to get out there and go out and just shoot something for once, and I brought along my Voigtlander 20mm 3.5. Now this is a pretty decent lens. I like it a lot because of its weight and size. This thing is tiny. It's a decent lens, but I was out shooting and I just realized that I absolutely love the 20mm focal length. Like, this is one of my favorite focal lengths of all time, and as a landscape photographer, it absolutely does the job I need it to do. I love the 20mm so much that I own 3 20mm lenses. The first one was a 20mm f1.8G from Nikon. The second was a 20mm f2.8D, and this one is the Voigtlander, obviously 20mm 3.5. And I love 20mm focal lengths, if you guys can't tell already. But I did use wide angle zooms at some point. I owned the Tamron 15-30 2.8, and that was an exceptional lens. It had great image quality, it had weather sealing, it had vibration control, and just an overall great lens built like a tank. And the great thing was it had a 2.8 aperture and it had a 15mm widest focal length, so that meant I could get really nice wide shots with that thing. And it was a great lens, but it was just big and heavy, like 2.8 wide angle zooms usually are. And as a landscape photographer, I want to hike and be able to travel as light as possible, and that lens just wasn't for me and what I wanted to do. So going from a 15-30 to a 20mm, it absolutely changed everything, because first of all, I love primes a lot. I don't know if you guys can tell, but most of my lenses are prime lenses, and I just don't feel the need to have that zoom range that a lot of landscape photographers like. For me personally, I don't actually use a zoom range, and that meant that a wide angle zoom would do me no good. So that's why in this video, I'll be telling you guys 4 reasons why I prefer the 20mm lens over a wide angle zoom like most photographers usually like. So the first reason is I don't really feel the need to zoom. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't really zoom with my wide angle zoom lenses. I don't really feel the need to have to zoom out into things and shoot photos of it, because when I'm shooting landscape photography, I usually want to get everything I can in the photo, and most of the time the things that I'm going to be getting in the photo are really vast and really large. So I want to be able to have that focal length that is able to get everything in there, and usually that means I'm shooting at the widest possible focal length. And that means I really don't need a zoom. The only things that I'm really going to be using to zoom is probably my 7300 Nikon, which is a telephoto. So that's really the only thing that thing is good for, is pretty much zooming in and isolating certain parts of the landscape. But with a wide angle lens, I want to be able to capture a lot of things and get unique compositions and be able to capture entire landscapes. So using a wide angle zoom lens doesn't really do me justice and really defeats the purpose of having a zoom lens in the first place. Now, I know a lot of people like to use their zoom lens to have different types of perspectives, but for me personally, if I feel like I have to zoom to get a photo, I don't really think that's going to be a good photo for me personally. And that's just a personal preference, of course. But that's why I love prime lenses so much, is that it takes the thought out of whether or not I should go out and zoom or I should just walk with my feet. I usually just end up walking anyways, because zooming with your feet is probably the best thing you can do for landscape photography, because you really want to maintain that wide perspective. And if you're zooming, you're not able to do that because it compresses the image. Prime lenses were perfect for me. If I need to zoom, I just walk with my feet, and zooming just doesn't do me justice. So that's one of the main reasons why I chose to use a prime 20mm over a wide angle zoom. The second reason why I choose a 20mm prime is because for things like astrophotography, if you're shooting astrophotography, you want to make sure you have a wide open lens, as wide as possible. So usually that means you want to be shooting at things like f2.8 and f1.8. If you want a wide angle zoom that has a 2.8 aperture, you're looking at things like Tamron 15-30 and the Nikon 14-24. Both of them are huge, heavy, expensive lenses that, one, I do not want to be carrying around everywhere, and two, I don't want to have to pack. Those things make me gravitate towards something like a 20mm f1.8 because they're small, lightweight, and they have nice open apertures. Now, if I were to be shooting at something like, I don't know, a 14-30 Nikon f4 or a 16-35 f4, that's great. But if I want to shoot astrophotography, that means I have to carry out another lens, something like the 20mm, probably 2.8. And I don't really want to be carrying around multiple lenses when I'm going out and shooting, because I don't really want to have more than I need. And as a landscape photographer, I want to be as minimalistic as possible and bring as minimal gear and spend as little money as possible, because I do not have a lot of money, so I really don't want to be spending more than I have to. Of course, Astro is something that I don't really shoot very often, but as a landscape photographer, it is a treat that you be able to shoot Astro every once in a while, and I want to be able to have the gear to allow me to go ahead and do that. So the second reason why is that the 20mm focal length offers great compression relative to something like a 14 or 15 or 16mm. I want to give you guys a quick example. This photo was shot in Hawaii about 3 years ago, I'd say, and I was using a 16mm lens. Now this photo was shot at the exact same location in Hawaii, but with a 20mm lens. And as you can see, the compression is very different. Now when you're shooting at a wide angle lens, focal length, like 20mm and lower, you're gonna see that a lot of these things that you're shooting, they're gonna be these huge mountains or trees or whatever you are that you're shooting. They're gonna look really small in the photo because you're shooting at a wide angle. Now in some instances, this is good because you're able to capture a lot of that image and you're able to capture a lot of the subject that you're shooting. But the bad thing is it really dwarfs it in comparison to what it really looks like in real life. That's just what a wide angle does. But the thing is with the 20mm, is that I feel like I'm able to get a nice compression. It doesn't make things look too small, and you're able to give some sort of perspective. And it's not super wide that it distorts everything, but it's enough to be able to capture everything that I want inside the frame. Now, obviously with a 20mm and with the compression, it's not able to get things in the foreground as nicely as things like a 14 or 15mm. Now that is a trade-off that you're gonna have to make. But for me personally, I just feel like I'm still able to get things in the foreground and make it look pretty good. That's really just something you gotta consider when you're shooting landscape photography, is that when you're shooting these things with a wide angle, things are going to look really small. So you really need to think about the lens you're using and the type of compression you're using, because do you really want to make those things that are supposed to be huge gargantuan subjects to be as small as they look in the photos? And that's just an artist's decision. That's a personal preference thing. But for me personally, the 20mm compression really is a nice middle ground between having that ultra wide angle look, but also being able to have things look the way that they do. So last and final reason is that prime lenses are generally lighter and smaller than things like wide angle zooms. So let's look at the three wide angle primes that I mentioned, the 20mm, the 1.8G, the 2.8D, and the Voigtlander 3.5. They're all under 400 grams. But then when you compare it to things like the Nikon 16 to 35, it is around 685 grams. Now that might not seem like a huge difference. It's about a 200 gram difference, but for a landscape photographer that has to carry all that weight on their back, it makes quite a big difference when you're going out and hiking about like 5 to 7 miles each hike. And when you're carrying those things on your back, it really weighs you down. And that's something as a landscape photographer, is that you want to be as minimalistic and light as possible. So going primes really makes a big difference. You don't have to carry as much weight on you, and you're able to hike farther and longer and not be as tired. And as a landscape photographer, you have to carry absolutely everything in your bag, and you don't have as much space. And these things, look how tiny this is. Now this does not take up as much space as something like a 16 to 35. So I'm able to just throw this in my bag and kind of just carry it around as a pancake. So yeah, that's kind of a big thing as well. Weight and size make a huge difference for landscape photography. And if I'm able to go lighter and smaller, then that really makes a difference. Now I can get into a ton of reasons why I think 20mm are superior to things like the 16 to 35 or just wide angle zooms in general. But honestly, as a landscape photographer, whatever you get the shot with is really what matters. If you prefer a wide angle zoom, go for it. If it's able to make your photography better, and if it's able to get the shot, then that's really all that matters. All this is really personal preference. And when I talk about 20mm focal length, there's obviously reasons why a 16 to 35 or a wide angle zoom would be better. Of course there is, but for me personally, this is why I really feel like the 20mm does me justice. But again, as long as you're able to get the shot, it doesn't matter what lens you use. This is all what I think. It's all personal preference. For you, it might be different. So yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Let me know what y'all think down in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys use for your wide angle lens, for your landscape photography. Comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.